This story isn't just about a heated TV interview. It's about what happens when anger meets empathy, when two people from opposing sides drop their walls and actually listen. When a fiery host confronted Donald Trump on live TV, no one expected what came next. What began as a clash turned into something unforgettable. What began as a seemingly ordinary television broadcast turned into a moment the nation would never forget. President Donald Trump had agreed to appear on Real Talk with Jensen, a show known for its unfiltered tone, biting commentary, and fierce criticism of political figures. The cameras were live, streaming across the biggest networks and social media platforms. The atmosphere was charged. Jensen, the fiery host, known for his directness and intense energy, stood opposite President Trump. His expression was stiff, his demeanor tense. Trump, as usual, appeared confident and composed, greeting the audience with his familiar wave. But Blake didn't return the gesture. Not even a forced smile. There was something bubbling beneath his professional facade as Trump began his opening remarks. Expressing gratitude for being on the show, Blake suddenly interrupted loud, abrupt, and emotional. Double quotes, "Mr. President, let's cut the formalities," he said sharply. "Americans are struggling, and many feel like you're not listening." Gasps echoed through the studio. Production staff exchanged worried glances behind the scenes. Trump raised his brow but held back a response. Blake didn't wait. "Why do you only show up when the spotlight's on you?" he demanded. "Where were you when my brother, a disabled veteran, lost his home?" The energy on set shifted immediately. What once felt like political theater now became intensely personal. Trump's facial expression changed. This wasn't about policy anymore. It was about pain. For a fleeting moment, everything froze. The studio, the cameras, the conversation. Blake's voice cracked as he spoke, betraying the emotions he had tried so hard to control. "My brother believed in you. He needed help." Trump leaned in slightly, his tone low and calm. "I'm sorry to hear that. What happened to him?" No one expected that response. Not even Blake. He had walked into the room ready for battle, but he hadn't braced for empathy. Faced with a sincere question from a man he openly criticized, Blake found his defensive wall crumbling. "He served in Afghanistan," Blake said, forcing the words out. "He came back with severe PTSD, couldn't hold down a job. Medical debt crushed him. He applied for assistance, but the system failed him. It got lost in bureaucracy. Last month, he died. Alone. Heart failure." Silence took over the room. Even the ruthless commenters in the live stream chat were quiet. No snarky remarks, no trolling. Just stillness. Trump lowered his gaze for a moment before looking Blake directly in the eyes. "That shouldn't have happened," he said firmly. "I want to know everything. Not on the air, off the record." Blake blinked, stunned. "What's the point?" he asked. "You'll walk out of here. The media will twist it, and nothing will change." Trump didn't flinch. "Try me." Backstage, producers signaled for a commercial break. The screen faded to black, and the studio lights dimmed. Trump stood and gestured to Blake. "Come with me." Hesitant, unsure, but curious, Blake followed him. They stepped into a quiet room behind the set, away from the stage, the applause, the pressure. Just the two of them, no titles, no politics, simply a grieving man and another willing to listen. Blake opened up. He spoke of Ryan, his younger brother, a proud soldier, a man who returned home to a system that didn't remember him. He didn't want charity, just respect. Some dignity, a fair chance. Trump listened closely, never interrupting. When Blake finally paused, Trump replied, "I've met so many veterans over the years, but the ones who fall through the cracks. That's on all of us." Blake was once again caught off guard, not by defiance, but by humility. Trump then asked for Ryan's full name and service details. Writing them down himself on a notepad he pulled from his jacket. "I can't undo what's happened," he said, "but I can make sure his story isn't ignored." Blake leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't in years. Heard. They returned to the set. The audience clapped, but there was a different tone now. The tension had been replaced by a quiet sense of gravity. Blake addressed the crowd. "What you just witnessed wasn't rehearsed. It was real. I came here angry, ready for confrontation. But sometimes, you get something you didn't expect. Honesty." Instead of hammering Trump with political questions, Blake pivoted. He asked about veterans, about homelessness, about the invisible Americans. Trump didn't deflect. He spoke with detail and statistics but also admitted shortcomings. "I'm not perfect," he said, "but I want to fix what I can." "For people like Ryan," Blake nodded slowly. "I still have questions. I still have doubts, but I didn't think this conversation would go the way it did." The live chat erupted. Not with hate, but with appreciation, veterans wrote in. Families shared similar stories. The raw emotion had struck a nerve across the nation. 2 days later, Blake received a letter on official White House stationery. Inside was a handwritten note. "Blake, I've asked my team to reopen your brother Ryan's case. I've also ordered an investigation into delays in veteran assistance processing. Ryan's story reminded me that truth doesn't always come from briefings. Sometimes, it comes from people brave enough to speak up. Thank you. Donald J. Trump included was the contact information for a senior official at the VA. Blake sat in silence, rereading the letter over and over. For years, he had screamed into cameras, fought against systems. But now, one honest conversation had sparked something real. Could it last? Could it bring true change? The following morning, he got a call from Colonel Angela Reed, head of the VA's Rapid Response Unit. Mr. Jensen, she said, the president personally asked us to prioritize your brother's file. We've already started. Blake was speechless. Later, that week, Blake's mother received an apology letter from the Department of Defense, along with long overdue benefits and a medal Ryan had earned but never received. Blake held that medal in his hands, and for the first time in years, the anger inside him began to soften, making room for grief, and possibly, healing. On his next show, Blake started differently. I've been angry for a long time, he admitted to his viewers. I lost faith. But this week, something changed. He held up Ryan's medal, told his story again, and the man I've criticized most, Donald Trump, listened. He acted, and I didn't expect that. Viewers responded with overwhelming support. Not because he praised Trump, but because he showed honesty, vulnerability, humanity. Ratings soared. But more importantly, so did hope. 1 week later, Trump reached out again. He wanted to visit Ryan's grave quietly. No press, no cameras. Blake was shocked. Why, he asked. Trump replied, because I never met him, but I owe him something. They met at the cemetery on a chilly Thursday morning. Just the two of them, with a single Secret Service agent. Watching from a distance, Trump placed a small American flag and Ryan's medal next to the tombstone. He stood silently for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you for your service," when it wasn't easy. As Trump left, an elderly Marine named Sam Torres, visiting a friend's grave nearby, approached Blake. "I saw your show," he said. "Your brother's story reminded me of mine. Thought nobody cared anymore." Blake shook his hand. "I care, and apparently, so does he." Sam nodded, smiling. "Maybe it's time we start believing in that again." The next week, Sam appeared on Real Talk. It became one of the most viewed episodes in the show's history. Inspired, Blake launched a new weekly segment, Voices of the Forgotten, spotlighting overlooked veterans across the nation. Trump noticed. He called Blake again. "You're doing good work," he said. "I'm just telling the truth," Blake replied. Trump chuckled. "That's what I've been trying to do too." A surprising friendship, or at least a mutual respect, began forming between the two. A month later, Trump formally invited Blake to host a roundtable with veterans at the White House. Blake hesitated. "I don't want to be used for optics." Trump responded directly. "Then don't. Come and say what needs to be said." Blake agreed with conditions. No scripts. Real veterans. Honest talk. The roundtable aired live and raw. The stories were painful, unfiltered, and true. Trump mostly listened. When he did speak, it was with care. That episode trended globally. Afterward, Trump offered Blake a tour of the White House. Blake joked, "I'm not here to be impressed." "I didn't bring you here to impress," Trump replied. "I brought you because I need your help." "With what?" Blake asked. "Veterans. Media. Communication. You've got a voice. People trust you." 2 weeks later, Blake was offered a position co-chair of a bipartisan advisory board on veteran affairs and media outreach. He called his mother. "Am I crazy for even thinking about this?" She answered gently, "Ryan would be proud." Critics came fast. Some accused him of selling out. Others called him a traitor to journalism. Blake addressed it live. "If sitting across from someone I disagree with helps even one person, call me what you want. Silence solves nothing." Even his harshest critics respected the conviction. Messages poured in. One stood out from an 11-year-old girl named Sophie. "My dad's a soldier. You helped people remember us. Thank you for not yelling and being kind." Blake read it on air, tears in his eyes. "This is why we talk, not to fight, but to heal." Momentum grew. Change happened. A bill was introduced, Ryan's Reform Act, to speed up support for disabled veterans. At the signing, Trump said, "Sometimes it takes someone yelling at you on live TV to open your eyes." Laughter followed, and applause. On Ryan's death anniversary, Trump invited Blake and his mother to Arlington. A plaque honoring Ryan's service had been installed. Blake's mother cried. He would have never imagined this. Neither did Blake. Months later, Trump returned to Real Talk. This time, the tone was different. Respectful. Real. At the end, Blake asked, "Do you regret coming on my show?" Trump smiled. "Not for a second. You were angry, but you were right." They shook hands. The internet erupted with support. A year later, a college student asked Blake, "What changed you?" He paused and said, "Listening and being listened to. When your pain turns into purpose, it can help others heal too." That line went viral. Eventually, Blake stepped away from TV. He focused on advocacy, on building solutions. Trump, no longer in office, continued to quietly support the programs they started together. Two very different men, once adversaries, now connected by something beyond politics. Purpose. And for millions watching that first unforgettable night, they'd never forget how it started, with an angry TV host, a listening president, and a conversation that changed everything. Today, we learned that sometimes the loudest voices are the ones that need to be heard the most. Real change doesn't always start in a conference room. Sometimes, it starts with a painful truth shared on national TV. If you've ever felt unheard, know this: your story can make a difference. What would you have done in Blake's place? Tell us in the comments. We're listening.